Jeanne Mayo, welcome to the Healthy Leadership Podcast. I've been looking forward to this. I've been trying to schedule this for 5 years, so thank you.
You're too nice, Doug. You're too
for
nice.
making time.
Way too nice.
For those listening, Jeanne and I connected. She runs a program called the Cadre to invest in youth leaders across the country. And I went through several years of the Cadre and had my life transformed by Jeanne and her legacy and what she does. And so I'm just so fond of her, and I think she's going to add massive value to you. But for those who may not know, kind of the overview of who Jeanne Mayo is. Jeanne, can you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're passionate about?
Oh, what fun. I have been in full-time ministry for 53 awesome years, and still, I laughingly say, my big honor is that I still am a real Christian and still love the local church. I realize not everybody on here is at all connected with either of those, but that's my big deal. So I just have run youth and young adult ministries, also educational programs, Atlanta Leadership College. Then I ran accredited elementary and high schools up to about 1,500 students, co-pastored with my husband, ran several of the women's ministries. And then, like I said, Cadre is on year 18, and I love it. And then now I've begun Platinum Leadership Coaching, which is kind of a different venue of focus on leadership coaching. And I've also begun Prevail Women's Mastermind for ladies who want to up their level of leadership. So it's a fun, amazing run. My husband jilted me, not really. He already made it to heaven, is what I'm trying to say. He kind of exited with a stroke, and I had 2 years, and I had the 3 years really of the privilege of caring for him at home. After that time, Lewy body dementia became his agonizing partner during that time. 2 amazing sons, both of them. One runs a local church, another nonprofit in LA, both adults. Two of the greatest grandsons in the world have a happy life.
Yeah,
Still at it, by the way.
Retirement.
Still at it. Yeah, I don't, bingo is not my game. So I go, well, that sounds really boring. And then people ask me if I'm going to remarry. And I laughingly say, Doug, look at men close to my age. It's kind of like looking for a parking space. It is. It's like looking for a parking space. The good ones are already taken or they're handicapped. And so I'm going, nah, I think I'm fine. I'll just keep pouring into leaders and having a great time.
Well, I love that. I want to talk about longevity, 53 years in ministry. And, we live in a world where now I think fewer and fewer people, unfortunately, can say that. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of leaders come and go over those 53 years. I think everyone starts strong. They want to make it to their finish line. But unfortunately, so many fall away. I'll just leave this really, really open-ended to start. What advice do you have for leaders when it comes to longevity and making it to their finish line intact?
Well, I read and study all the time, like you do. And a great book entered my life a few years back, secular in nature, called Grit, The Power of Perseverance and Passion. It's by Jessica Duckworth. I would really recommend anybody interested in the topic get a hold of it. It's a great read. And she opens by talking about the West Point admissions process. When you get there, there's a 2-month orientation called The Beast, which pushes you academically, athletically, emotionally, leadership-wise, whole 9 yards. They used to think that your score on the Beast would predict long-term success on the battlefield. They learned they were wrong. And they learned that only one thing predicted success, and that was what she comes to call grit, the power to stick to it. And then they did the surveys in all sorts of career fields, and it seemed to be an absolutely common theme. And she talks, very interesting, Doug, about a society that she says is distracted by talent. And you and I have seen that. People get too wazooed over who's good on a stage or who just distracted by the glitz and the talent. But she said statistics that she did showed that people who chose to just cultivate their grit, and your grit can be grown. It's not just something you get. It is something you have some degree of it, but you can cultivate it. And so I've just watched so many people, both in the secular and in the religious world, who started well. I mean, a lot of great starters, and you know that, but not a lot of great finishers. And so I've just tried to cultivate grit in my own life and outstay the people who wanted me to, to go away. And by that, I don't mean not passing the baton. I passed a million batons. But in a wonderful way, I say at my funeral one day, Doug, when you come, because there's going to be a kicktail cadre reception after the funeral. I planned this. Everybody keeps going, when are we having a reunion? I said at my funeral. But I've already left. You would crack up. In my will, I've left money for the food for that funeral. I got it.
You're too
and
good.
I have. You even remember that soft cinnamon stuff I served you called monkey bread?
100%.
There will be monkey bread there. I mean, I got the menu. I got it.
Those Oreo cookies. Oh,
yeah. I got it. We got it all. It's coming out there. It's So I just laughingly often say to all of you, I want to finish the race with the wind in my face. And so that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. You mentioned, one of the obstacles that you faced is people that just want you out of the race. What do you think has enabled you, with leadership, there comes a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pain that comes with leadership. How have you overcome those bumps in the roads, those painful seasons, people coming against you? What have you done to develop the grit to go through that? Because that could be excruciating.
Well, yeah, it has been. And everybody listening has had their own bumps, small, large, personal, career-wise. That's all of us. There's a leadership book by Warren Venus called Geeks and Geezers. And let me read you a comment he makes here, and I would use it as my answer. The ability to find meaning and strength in adversity distinguishes leaders from non-leaders more than any other one single quality. Wow. When negative things happen, non-leaders feel powerless and like victims. Leaders, on the other hand, find fresh purpose and resolve. And that's what I've done. I have said, okay, I'm faced with this thing. So obviously I deal with my own emotions on it. I'm not pretending like it's a great thing. It's not a great thing. I deal with my own needs to hurt, to forgive, all that normal stuff we all deal with. But then I say to myself, I've got to create some meaning out of this adversity, or I call it pain with purpose. There's an old Japanese proverb that says, get knocked down 7 times, stand up 8. And so I think experience isn't what happens to a person. It's what the person does with what happens to him. And so for me, it's been a fun run.
Yeah. Talk about character development. I'm sure you've seen a lot of people fall just because of a lack of character. Maybe they went through a tough season and everything fell. What can leaders do to better prepare not to fall when that pressure comes on?
I think one of the things that I want to say to most of us is big is not better. I think we self-promote so much in every arena of life, and I'm not meaning be lazy and just sit around and let success come to you. On the other hand, I think it's so important to live the season wholeheartedly that you're in. And for anybody who is like us, a Christ follower, and I realize that's not everybody who are listening to the podcast, but if you are a Christ follower, gosh, I would say it is so easy to go on autopilot in your faith with Jesus Christ. And eventually that will have, obviously, from my philosophical standpoint, some huge problems in your longevity, coming through difficult times. Because I know this sounds really cheesy, but it's almost like every day as I'm reading my Bible or talking to the Lord, most of the time without any feeling to it, it's as though I'm investing in what I'm going to have to pull out from later on when the tough times come. And then when the tough times come, learning to learn the lessons, but forget the details.
Wow.
Learn the lessons, because every tough time has lessons to teach all of us, but forget the details. And when the tough times come, learn not to give too much weight to the people who sit in the cheap seats. The cheap seats are the people that are up close, they're yelling in your ear, they're accusing, they're defaming. Give the weight of influence to the people who've paid to be in the family box, the people who you need to listen to, because at those moments in adversity, you're very vulnerable to voices and impact and what they're saying. And then last of all, when you're going through those really tough times, and I'm going to quote this again from Geeks and Geezers. All true leaders studied, had countless heartbreaks, devastations, betrayals, failures, life-altering setbacks, he says. Yet in every instance, true leaders carried, and I love this phrase, the gold of meaning away from their personal crucibles. I love that phrase, the gold of meaning. That one choice alone became the determining factor that took them to new levels of victory rather than deeper levels of victimhood. And so again, it's just the fulfillment of saying, okay, I'm gonna live through it. I'm gonna talk it through. I myself think you're really smart to invest in a good counselor. I have for years. And I think that's been an amazing investment for me to get outside perspective, also be able to say anything I want to say and not have to be concerned with it. But one more quote from that book. When I'm in those tough times, I have to realize that I'm the storyteller. I'm going to create my own narrative, whether I'm a victim, this pitiful little pearl, and a lot of people, even especially women in my career field, have chosen to just believe, well, it's just a male-driven career field that, is really unfairly punked to women. I'm sure that's certainly there. But in the book, he says, you are the storyteller of your own life. You can create your own legend from a time of adversity or your own petty melodrama. The choice is always yours. So by God's grace, I'm trying to not make myself a legend, but be an example of, hey, come on, tough it up. You got it. You can go through this.
Yeah. Oh, you've certainly been that to thousands and thousands of leaders. I would love to just get your thoughts on restoration if someone does fall. So we're talking a lot about preventing fall, or when we go through bumps in the road, not seeing ourselves as victims. We live in a culture where, we live in cancel culture. One bad mistake, one fall, and according to the rest of the culture, you're done for life. You can never be used by God again. You can never get back up. What are you seeing and thinking as you think about restoring leaders back into a place where they can be used significantly by God again?
Well, first of all, cancel culture canceled a bunch of people who didn't deserve to be canceled, and we all know that. So, I mean, it was, and it yet is true. I heard it. We're in the middle of, the submarine that went down to look for Titanic. It's all over the news right now. And I was reading just today somebody talking about, how social media has made it so easy for all of us to cancel everybody and make everybody an absolute idiot. And so, first of all, I would say, be careful. There are often two sides to every story. When it comes to a major fall in morality, I think we have to realize that there is a huge difference. And now I'll talk from a Christian perspective. There's a huge forgiveness, but there's a huge difference between forgiveness and restoration. Forgiveness, as I read the Bible, can be instantaneous. When I own my sin, Lord, I was an idiot, I caused that, I ask your forgiveness. The Word of God says that He forgives my sin and casts it as far as the east is from the west. I think we have to be careful, though, in the church leadership world, not to confuse that with restoration. Major falls happened not just overnight, and we won't find the inward steel to come back all the way unless we're just all fluff on the outside and not a great deal of substance on the inside. That is found slowly. There are roots there, whether it's roots on how we treat our family, roots on what we believe about ourselves, roots on how we've identified success in our life. But gosh, that stuff takes time to unpack for your own longevity. And so my concern is just, and again, Doug, in this, I'm speaking often from the church world perspective. We often seem to think that talent is a suitable substitute for genuine anointing.
Wow.
And that's wrong. And we all know it's wrong, but if a man or woman is on a stage, maybe they're a worship leader, or a communicator, and they have great talent. If they say the right words, within a couple of weeks, we're back on stage. And that's very unfair, because the same pressures will be there without the time to go to root structures. And that would be true in secular employment. And obviously the same pressures come on somebody, whether he is a very prominent businessman or a successful entrepreneur. Success always comes with pressure. And so my concern with all of us is that when we fail, and that is certainly not something that we can't come back from, but be careful. Do yourself a favor. Take the time to get to the root of the vulnerability and remove yourself from the same pattern, if that makes sense. Because failure didn't happen just because you went, oops. Failure happened because you kept letting the fuse on the firecracker, whatever you want to envision it as, go shorter and shorter. I call it fuse shorteners, with persons or places or priorities or patterns, 4 Ps, and shorten. And then eventually things exploded, but it wasn't just that last 60 seconds.
Yeah. Interesting. When you talked about dealing with the inner roots, one of the things you mentioned is how people define success. And you work with leaders all the time. I feel like everyone, especially in ministry, deals with this. They're always defining success by numbers, or how big their church is, or how many people they're reaching. You grew up in a generation with a lot of pioneers. You're a pioneer. You grew up with the Maxwells of the world, the Andy Stanleys. And you've set yourself apart. I'm just curious, how do you define success in your life in a way that hasn't put so much pressure on you that you crumble?
I think everybody in life, whatever your career field, has some unspoken measuring sticks. secular or spiritual. Mine, and you've already mentioned it well, and really it would transfer to secular numbers, whether it was bodies in the seats or dollar signs or the number of invitations to large stages. For me, defining success, and it's so simple, it's embarrassing to say, is that those who know me best love me most. And that sounds so trite and so yeah. Everybody
So
says
good.
that, but it really is. I want, even as Sam, my husband, had his stroke, Doug, and I got to care for him for 3 years at home, had a caregiver come in during the day, and then I went to work and then cared for him the 12 hours in between. So many people said put him in a care facility because he didn't know me anymore. He didn't know his children. And there's nothing wrong with a care facility. Let me stress that 1,000,000 times over. But he was my husband. And I was gonna show to those that I'd mentored, but especially my own 2 sons, what till death do us part really looks like in sickness and in health.
Wow.
My 2 sons are both in different forms of ministry. They've watched it up close. They've seen the joys, but they've seen the big heartbreaks and the crashes. But they've watched their father and I navigate the crashes, go to counselors, but yet not be people of revenge and perpetual bitterness. So when I say success for Jeannie is that both, now that Sam's in heaven, that Josh and Justin Mayo, my adult sons, can sit on the front row of that funeral and say what Justin, as a kid at one of my national youth leader conferences, said to about 3,000 youth leaders, and he was just 16 at that point. He said, if you don't like my mom on this stage, you wouldn't like her at home because she's exactly the same. And
Doesn't get any better than that.
that's
Wow.
pretty awesome. That's the best compliment I think I'll ever get from him. And so I want him to be able to say that. That's success for me. Then I'm just going to be faithful to do what's in front of me. Do I ever feel like a failure? Of course. Do I ever? Some of my spiritual kids are doing so much more than me, and that thrills me. And yet when I look at their Instagram feed, I go, let's go past this for a while, because I'm going, shoot, I'm not doing anything, But the issue is, again, finding your lane and being the very best you can be in your lane. And knowing, as I read the Bible, he says what he's going to judge us all on is faithfulness. I don't see anything that indicates, and again, obviously we want to reach people kingdom-wise. I'm not stupid. I certainly do. Do I notice numbers? Do I? Yes, of course I do. You'd be an idiot not to. On the other hand, success for me is I'll be faithful. And people like you, Doug, will be able to say, you know what? I saw her 20 years, 30 years, 40 years after I did the cadre. She's still basically the same person. She's still growing, still cares about people, still loves Jesus, still is fun. If I can put that all together, I've done okay.
Yeah, long obedience in the same direction. And yeah, I've known you,
Yes.
I think, since 2007, 2008. And
Yes.
yeah, it's just such a joy. I mean, I feel like we pick up right where we left off, which is so wonderful.
I do too.
I know we were talking about, success and not defining it on numbers and things like that. But at the same time, you've lived a life, and what God's trusted you with to be faithful with, he's allowed you to be significantly used by him to reach, thousands and thousands. You've been on the stages with thousands of people in attendance. You've hung out with the people who have some of the largest ministries on the planet. I always like to ask leaders, including yourself, as you've spent time with leaders that are being used on that scale by God, and even yourself, do you feel like there's anything that sets them apart that allows them to be able to be used by God in that way? Or do you feel like that's just God's plan for their life and they're just being faithful to it?
Well, I do think that there's a part of sovereignty. The issue, I look at my husband who read his Bible and prayed and had a purer heart than most anybody I've ever met. Yet his ministry was never famous. It was never many thousands of people. So I have to stop and say there's a bit of sovereignty there, because if it's all defined by inner press to God, my husband got a ripoff. Having said that, and I believe that, but going beyond that, many of the people that I know up close, the Craig Rochelle's, the people that are doing major things, Sean Johnson, a son in the Lord, amazing things for the kingdom, do have, when you get up close to them, they do have much similarity in a really inward, sincere heart. They don't believe their own press release. They didn't set out to be famous, as it were. They're pretty authentic in dealing with some of the traps of fame, because there are. And they care about their inward person, if that makes sense. They really do care. And one other thing, when you meet them on the elevator of a big conference before they've gone on the stage, they're still the same caring person they're going to be when they're coming off the stage and everybody knows them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I many times, and I'm in green rooms with hundreds of wonderful speakers, obviously, but I think it's concerning when your persona on a stage is markedly different from your persona and your attitudes and your disposition off stage. That would not be true of some of the people that I would deem to be, quote unquote, very successful, highly successful in today's nonprofit world.
Yeah. I want to talk to you a little bit about developing leaders, because you've been doing it for 53 years and have been doing a phenomenal job at it. You have a program called the Cadre, which I would love for you to just give, a 30-second pitch on just what that is so people have more context. But it certainly impacted me. But what, in your experience, what has been the best way to develop leaders?
Gosh, the best way to develop leaders is a leader living up close to other leaders and downloading the wisdom of their mistakes and failures and successes. Any form of discipleship, let alone leadership training. And I study all the time. So, gosh, I absolutely, that's so essential. And like I said, I do it constantly. Having said that, though, Doug, I yearned call it a mentor, a leader. I yearned for that. And I offered to pay for that to several people. And I just said, if I could even call you, as before Zoom, and if you could give me an hour every other month. I remember doing this pitch. No go. And they'd make all these excuses or whatever. But I think oftentimes leadership coaching doesn't look glamorous enough, because it's one person at a time. It's how Jesus did it. Wow. He had 12 guys and he did life with them. And out of the 12, he had 3 that he spent more time with. And out of the 3, he had John the Beloved, who obviously got up close and got more than the others. So that's where the Cadre began. Doug, I just wanted to give to leaders and pastors what I had never had myself. Now, when you were going through it, it was all youth leaders. But my board several years ago said, Jeanne, open it up. And so I have leaders who deal with children, with teenagers, with adults, music, the whole 9 yards, because everything is so transferable. And so, it's just, if anybody's interested, we're in application season now, and you can fill out the application online. You go to Jeanne Mayo and go to the cadre, and you can find out specifics about it. But you're in my home, groups of about 50 in my home, 2 to 3 times a year for 2 days, 2 hours of personal Zoom calls with your cadre, an amazing cohesion with a group of men and women that have some similarity in the church that they're in, or the nonprofit, or the size, what you're called to do, which is another thing. I think to groom a leader, there has to be some of that iron sharpens iron, some people that get it. We all throw the word community around loosely. We throw the word around looser than we cultivate it.
Wow.
Community is not just that I, as a leader, have my favorite pals and we're together. How are you really cultivating this for other people? How do you make it easy to onboard this community thing? Because all community doesn't start. Now, once in a while, we meet somebody and there's an instantaneous connection. Not usually, though. It takes time. And so I create that. You'll remember, Doug and Knight, that we called "It's Okay Not to Be Okay," and it was an important night because we had built enough community that we said everything we say stays in this room, and it has. 18 years, we've never had a blow up from that. But so many of us have things that are that last 5% that most people don't know, that where we felt we failed or blew it or didn't measure up, or mind games, all that stuff. And so again, it's just, I say to the cadre all the time, let me unpack 53 years and give it to you. And then they all have my emails, so they're able to ask personal questions, and the emails never close. And so I'm still getting emails from the cadre members from 18 years ago.
Wow.
And nobody answers those emails ever. People always say, dear God, Jeanne, let somebody else answer. But they can't, because people have got to be able to say anything they need to say and know that nobody else is going to know that. And, I just left my wife, Jeanne. Whatever. And so again, it's what I've chosen to give my life to, Doug. I've been a youth leader. I had a youth group of 1,000 teenagers coming every week in a church of 3,000. So the odds were pretty amazing. Loved it. Loved every bit of it. And like I said, I've done all those different ministries you heard me bop around on. Still love young adults and youth leaders. Gosh, still do. But my lane is what I call 100x. When the word of God says in the gospel, some seed bears 30-fold, some 60-fold, some 100-fold. I'm looking, and this sounds so trite, but it's really my life. I'm trying to make other people way more successful than I was. I'm trying to put them on my shoulders. That's 100x for me. 100x. By the way, you're going to laugh at this. When Sam passed away, I had to decide what was on my side of the tombstone, which was a ripoff. I'm going, I went to the mortuary that day ready to define his. And they go, and yours? And mine, I can't define my own tombstone. That's weird. But what they put it all down, and the only thing they add to yours, just so you can know when you do this one day, is the date of your death. So I'm going, shoot, I got Sam's, but my 2 adult sons were there, and they defined mine. And on one side, they put Jesus with skin on, and then at the bottom, they put 100x.
Wow.
And so, again, that's what I'm trying to do. Not impressive, not worthy of being world's most well-known whatever, just trying to believe in people one person at a time and help them be their best self.
Yeah, and you do that so well, and I'm so grateful for it. And if you're listening to this, one of our values here is community. We say no leader should ever do life alone, but in community. And every leader needs a place where they're fully known, fully loved, and fully challenged. And if you're looking for that leader, I'm telling you, I was in the country for multiple years, transformative. I found that community there. I found that family there. And it's so fun. I'm still friends with all the guys in my cadre, and we still stay in touch and watch each other. And it's been amazing to watch just the family go 100x and just impact the world. It's been unbelievable. So if you're looking for an incredible experience, I really encourage you. We'll include links in the show notes if you want to check that out. I don't want to ruin all the surprises for you, but the times down at Jeanne's, you'll never forget for the rest of your life. They're not just you sitting and learning. It's an experience that you'll never forget. And I just have such grateful memories. Yeah.
You're so nice. Thank you, my friend. Let's see, was it $1,000 I paid for that? I can't remember the deal we brokered before I got on.
We'll deal with it offline.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We'll figure it out. Thank you.
When I think about one of the reasons that you're so impactful in the cadre, we all affectionately call you Mom. And Henry Cloud has this quote, and I always think of you. He said, everyone needs mothering and fathering, and it often doesn't come biologically. Find it. And as I look at specifically the men, I know you invest in women too, but the men that I'm friends with that have sat under your ministry, the fact that we have a spiritual mom that can invest in us as a mom, I can't put into words how that impacts. I guess, what is your heart for leaders from a mom's perspective?
Oh, I think the mom, if you have a stereotype of a mom, you think of somebody who connects with you emotionally. Somebody, and certainly dads do this also, but somebody who believes in you tenaciously, and somebody who is remarkably safe to say what's going on inside your heart, their heart, all the time. And that's what I've tried to be. I think, and I always say to everybody when I start cadre, every year, it's the same spiel, Doug, you heard years ago. Look, call me anything you want, except I'm not real cool on long titles, but they all make up all these titles. I said, I'll answer to anything. But the mom title, to me, there are two words in the dictionary that both start with M, and I think they're both sacred, mentor and mom. And if indeed eventually I can fill, and I say to them, I'm not taking your mother's place. That's ridiculous. Right. That would be A, unbiblical, and B, impossible. Who in their right mind would try to do that? But I want to be more than Jeanne Mayo on a stage. If you're in my living room, I want to get to know you over time personally. I want you to feel like I care personally. And the deal is, again, I think we all need to feel like we're more than just another person to a few people. And one thing I read years ago said, every person created needs to feel like somebody else holds the button pad to their heart and knows how to get to it. And so, again, just caring, loving, nothing weird. The problem is our society's gotten so crazy trying to cancel this or define this or all that other junk. Look, life can be painful but amazingly simple. So it's just caring for people. That's why I have cadre dug in the home, because, gosh, my house takes a beating. I mean, a whole beating. You can only imagine. You can only imagine. Oh, gosh. But and we move everything. We move the couch, the chairs, put chairs down, then move it back for dinner, then move it back it's crazy. But it's, again, a simple way of saying, okay, what can I do here to make them feel not like I'm Jeanne Mayo on a stage at Hillsong or something, but then I'm Jeanne Mayo and a bit of a mom. Like when Paul talked about, you have a lot of instructors, but not many fathers in the faith. And you hear a father in the faith much deeper than you hear just another instructor. So it's great to have a million instructors. I revere them. I have several. But gosh, I want to pay dues, so that like even when I got your email request to share on this podcast, my first words were, "Oh gosh, she did cadre years ago." I mean, it's like this ridiculous fraternity that I go, "Oh, oh, that makes you wonderful if you did cadre." I even have a room in the house, Doug. It was before your time, called the Cadre Coliseum. And I have all your pictures up from all
Oh,
the
wow.
years. Yes, Cadre Coliseum. Thank you. You are in my house. Yes.
Jeannie, can you talk about, because I mentioned when you go to Cadre or go to your house, it's not just a visit, it's an entire experience. And that's been you through and through, whether you're speaking on stage, hosting people in your home, doing ministry. You are great at creating world-class environments and experiences for people to transform their lives. I'm just curious, when you're planning a transformational experience with hospitality, what goes through your mind, and maybe any advice for leaders on there on creating a culture that the transformation could take place in?
Well, let me do the simple stuff first. Friendship is always the highway to the heart. And most people wait to be friendly until, till they feel friendly. And that's a mistake. And they think it's being phony if you act friendly before you feel friendly. Oh, no, it's not. It's not phony. It's being mature and unselfish. To be warm and outgoing, somebody in a group has to create an atmosphere of friendship. And so we do that from the greeters at my front door and the dumb red carpet that I lay out when you walk in. So stupid, but it
It
sends a
matters.
message. It matters.
Yes.
It
Yes.
matters, doggone it.
100%.
It matters. And the ridiculous stuff I have in the kitchen waiting for you to eat, and just the music that's going, it matters. So let me just say, it starts with creating a friendly atmosphere, which is people smiling when they don't feel like smiling, which is people making an attempt to get to know somebody else when that feels awkward. But you try, you stumble through the conversation. You don't just look for peeps that look like you're kind of cool, because we can do that. But you're looking for everybody to feel. In every cadre, there's somebody weird. I just every cadre, there's somebody weird. I mean, I won't even go there.
Do you
But
have a room for those people? No, I'm just not.
yeah.
Bad joke.
Never
Bad
mind.
joke.
I'm not even getting there. But
Yeah.
but there is every year. I think, how did that person get in here? Ugh. But the reality is, how they're treated is a great barometer on how I'm doing with creating a friendship culture. And
Wow.
and then beyond that, the friendship culture, which is mammoth and huge, opening hearts. Then in the experience, saying, okay, words are forgotten easily, but experiences are not. And so it doesn't mean that every coaching block I do has an experience with it. Certainly isn't. A couple of things, I make sure that those coaching blocks are interactive, because I'm kidding myself if I keep talking and think people are listening. I do an opening, and then I open the floor for questions. In the cadre, you get to choose what the coaching blocks are on from a variety of things. And so I know I'm camping where people want to hear and question. So it's interactive. That's huge. We all know that. But then it's experimental many times, not all the time. But, and I won't go too far on this because I'm telling too much, but there's a night, and I choose to, in the evenings, edit way down movies, because I think movies, I know where I want to go, so I choose movies to get me there. I think that is remembered better than another little sermonette. And Jesus was a parable teller. So I think, again, he told stories and he made them come alive. I want to do that. So I have a couple of TVs up in the living room and we just go for it. And I've edited it down, tried to edit most of the cuss words out, and you laughed at because anymore that gets hard. Like, whoo, I am a huge fan of the latest Maverick movie. And so I used it, but trying to get rid of all the cuss words there. Good. But just a fun run at what I'm trying to focus on that night. And then afterwards, doing it, not always, sometimes just praying together and being done, but sometimes doing stuff like handing out heavy bricks to each of the iron groups and saying, you're going to make a run together. You're all holding onto this rope. You're going to do it together. I won't say anymore, kind of give something away. Digging up something in my backyard. I won't go any further with that. They all sound cheesy when I talk about them now, but I promise you they're not. It's just creating. So what I want to say is experiences are not that tough to create if it matters enough to you that you start far enough ahead to think of them. I think most of us say, I can't do that because I'm not creative. Well, ask some creative people, brainstorm. But the real stopping point for most of us is we don't care enough to start early enough. So we're not, it's not just, oh, I'm not creative. That's a cheap pass. Find some people that are, brainstorm. What could we do to make this more unforgettable? And then we go from there. So it's just a fun run for me. I love it.
Yeah, well, thank you for creating unforgettable memories that I have for sure. And I know everyone else in the cadre as well.
You're so nice.
With the time that we have left, I want to jump into the lightning round. A bunch of fun questions I always ask at the end of every interview. This was not going to be a lightning round question, but for the time it is. You've raised an incredible family. You had a lasting marriage. Best parenting advice?
It may not be glamorous, but you'll have your kids when everything else goes away. So your most important role in life is not what you do when you back your car out of the driveway. It's what you do when you bring your car back to the driveway.
Best marriage advice?
Wow. Sam and I did something so little, but it was transformative. Once a week, usually for us it was Tuesday evenings, we would ask each other, tell me 3 things you did this week, I did this week, that brought joy to you. And it'd be 3 simple affirmations, not just on all the same weird stuff, but just little stuff. Wednesday night, you were great. You played with the kids. You didn't seem to get bored.
Wow.
And then tell me one thing this week, the past 7 days, that you either misunderstood or ticked you off and made you angry, or you just don't get. So the obvious, we were affirming, but we were also quickly bringing to the top of the table stuff that eventually could become quite big if it was allowed to fester. And we did every week. Sometimes it was through in about 3 minutes. Other times it was through a couple of hours later.
Wow.
But I think it had more to do with keeping our marriage really what we wanted it to be than almost anything else we did.
So good, so simple, so practical. Thank you for sharing. Best advice you've ever received, and who gave it to you?
He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. Obviously not given to me physically, given to me by study. Jim Elliot, the martyred missionary. It's become the mantra of my life. And gosh, I knew his wife quite well before she passed away, obviously not him, but it to a young girl who is yearning for something, that purpose that I could give my life to. That particular cohesion of words said, that's it. He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep in every situation to gain ultimately what he cannot lose.
Maybe the same answer, but if you could put a quote on a billboard for everyone to read, what would that say?
That's the same one. You're smart.
Same one.
You're very wise. You know me well.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if your books are still in your garage. I remember you probably had 10,000 books in your library.
I do.
I'm sure there's a lot more. Maybe you mentioned grit already. Is there one book either in the last year or all time that you would just say, wow, out of all the books I've read, this was, or maybe even one or two, most impactful to you?
Not just this last year, but overall wise?
Either, whatever is
I
fresh.
Still say, and it's so simple, but I still love Tale of Three Kings, Jeanne Edwards.
Yeah,
it's so simple. You get it read in 2 hours. Yeah, it's simple. But it just reminds me again of all the things, because life is full of spear throwers. I mean, whatever career field, family, whatever you're in, there are going to be spear throwers. And a lot of who you are is very determined by how you deal with that. And then on the leadership side, though that's leadership as well, I still over and over go back to read Jim Collins' old book, Good to Great. I go to the chapter summaries. I don't read the whole book. I read his summaries. They're so simple, but they're absolutely gold, absolutely gold. And when I see myself beginning to get sloppy about a couple of things, invariably I find somewhere in those dumb 10 things something that I thought, okay, Jeannie, shore this up a little bit more. So I'm not saying Jim Collins's book is the answer to all leadership malaise, but it yet remains huge for me.
You've got to spend time with some of the greatest leaders on the planet, and I know you're a huge learner. I'm curious, do you have a go-to question or two where if you get a dinner with a Craig show or, name your hero, that you always ask?
Well, I often will find myself asking people, what was the personality you had to create in your childhood in order to survive it? That tells me a great deal about them. And time again, the answer to that question usually deals with exactly what geeks and geezers are talking about, dealing with, hey, how did I face into pain or challenges or loss? And then to say, okay, top 3 things, simple as they may be, and usually they are simple, that you would say, gosh, these are the 3 harbor lights of the journey for me to becoming who I am now. What are the top 3? So I know them well by the time I've got those couple of questions answered.
So good. The first one, so deep. Go deep quick. I love it. A few questions left. I don't know if you have an actual bucket list or not. I don't remember, but I certainly know you've lived a bucket list life. I saw you were just in Alaska, which I was like totally jealous of.
Hey, I mushed in Alaska. I was not just in Alaska. I mushed in Alaska.
How was mushing?
It was amazing. I've watched all these dumb reality shows on TV when I have insomnia at night. So I watch these stupid things on TV. These Alaska shows, they all mush with their dogs. I wanted to mush, and I did. It was way cool.
It lived up to it. That probably answers my question. If what's something you've done that you think everyone should do before they die?
Oh, I think everybody needs to. Yeah, mush. I think it's just so fun, and just do something that is ridiculous for you. Do something that's ridiculous, and you're not probably gonna get it for Christmas. Just do something ridiculous. And
I love
mushing
it.
was that for me.
If you could go back to and have coffee with yourself at any age, what age would you have coffee with yourself, and what would you tell that version of Jeanne?
It'd be 21. It's when I married my husband. I would tell myself that ministry and just success in life, no matter how hard you tried to please the world, you weren't going to please everybody. And your strength, which for me is caring deeply and loving people, which I for real really do, could be played against you as a weakness. I really didn't realize that. And so I think I knocked my head against a lot of invisible walls, trying desperately to please way too many people. And, you've got to realize, Doug, when I started ministry 53 years ago, how do I say this nice? People were not being honest. They were like these people that talked about, when Jesus comes, everything's great. They're great. Their family's perfect. They've never had a bad thought in their life. And a name that many people listening won't even recognize, Jack Hayford. Entered my life as a mentor, but it was through his tapes. Now, later on, he became a dear friend, and I spoke at his conferences, but for many years, that was not so. And I listened to him, and he was honest, and he talked about very vulnerable things, and his honesty gave me permission to be honest myself with people that I was trying to have impact on. So, gosh, I would have said to 21-year-old Jeanne, look, you're not going to please a lot of people. Be careful because, again, your strength is loving people, but it can be played against you as weakness. And then you'll have mind games and feel like a failure, get discouraged easily, give way too much weight to the wrong voices from the peanut gallery. And secondly, I would have said, and gosh, I had the greatest marriage. I don't know anybody has a better one. I think I would have said marriage is not at all what Hollywood or songs make you think it is. I had a wonderful marriage, but I still look, Doug, and I think, and I kind of choose what I watch on TV. So obviously I'm not watching a bunch of really sketch stuff, but everything you watch has love scenes in it, everything. And if romance is what I see projected on the screen, Sam and I never had romance. I mean, kissing once and suddenly they're stripping clothes off and they're deep in heat. And it's Grey's Anatomy and they're slipping into a hospital equipment room. I'm thinking, dear God, this is not real. This is. So that would have been the other thing I would have said to myself. Look, Jeanne, love is still cultivated. Love is still a beautiful decision that you make. Just a decision to focus on the very best of the person and to talk honestly about the bumps like what we did. Because, I thought it was supposed to be moonlight and roses all the time.
That's so fun. Well, Jeanne, this has been such a joy. Our time's coming to an end, so I'll just leave this open-ended. Anything else you want to leave leaders with to end today's conversation?
Oh, no. Just, gosh, what fun to be able to do something with your life that really matters. And again, it's not the big crowd. It's how a couple of people around you, how you can make them feel. I think again, the greatest preaching is not your messages so much from a pulpit, but how when you're with people, the Jesus inside of you, whether you're laughing or crying, help to make them feel. And so I hope this is just a simple reminder to a bunch of awesome people, whatever their station in life, give your heart away. You will not regret it. Give yourself away. Don't be impressed with numbers or crowds. Find individuals, because real impact is always an individual sport, not a mass sport.
Well, Jeanne, thank you for a lifetime of long obedience in the same direction. It's impacted the world 100x, and we're very grateful.
You're
Thank you so much.
so good. Thanks, Doug. An honor to talk to you.